Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the February 5th business meeting for the Washington County Board of Education. We have a quorum of members present. We'll call the meeting to order. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Man back there.
Yes, we did. So we can do it again.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0 with the student concurring. Is this Sean Cook who's come to the back? Would you come on forward?
We're going to start the meeting.
I must have just missed you. So why don't you come forward? We're gonna start the meeting again, young man.
All right.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and
Where are you from?
where you're from?
Do you want to talk in the microphone?
He has to.
Yeah, talk in the microphone. Tell where you're from.
I'm Sean and I'm from Winter Street School.
All right. So we stand for
Welcome. Thank you. We're going to stand, and when everybody stands and you're ready, flag's right there, you start the pledge for us, okay?
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you. You want to introduce who you have with you here today?
My mom,
Thanks, Mom, for bringing him. And who else?
Miss Berger, the vice principal of Winter Street School.
Thank you, Miss Berger.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes.
Mr. President, minutes from two different dates. The board had a closed session on Tuesday, January the 15th, regular business meeting on the same date, a work session on January 29th, and a closed session on January the 29th. We have minutes in our packet from those meetings, and I move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Are there any comments, questions, discussions, or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, the question is on Mr. Bailey's motion to approve the minutes. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion carries 6-0, and the student concurs. Next on the agenda is public comment. Nobody has signed up to speak at public comment. Is anybody who's here like the opportunity to speak? Okay, we'll move on then to old business. Consideration, second reading of policy IKA.
Good afternoon, Dr. Hardings, board members, Dr. Wilcox. On January 15th, 2013, the Board of Education approved the first reading of the proposed changes to policy IKA. Since the first reading, members of the public were invited to provide comments on the proposed changes. No comments were received. On behalf of the Policy Committee, we are requesting the Board of Education's approval of the second reading of the proposed changes to policy IKA.
Is there a motion to approve the second read of policy IKA?
Mr. President, I move for the approval of policy IKA at the second read.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Any comments or discussion? Seeing none, then the question is on the motion by Mrs. Fisher to approve policy IKA. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion carries 6-0 with the student concurring.
Thank you.
Next item is a consideration of a gift to Boonesboro High School. Mr. Akers.
Good afternoon, President Hardings, members of the board, Dr. Wilcox. I'm here on behalf of Boonesboro High School to ask your approval of a generous gift from an anonymous donor of $15,500 that will be used to support the band, orchestra, and theater programs at Boonesboro High School.
Thank you, Mr. Akers. Is there a motion to approve the gift?
I would like to move for acceptance, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Is there a second?
I second it.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Is there any discussion? I just want to say to whoever it is that made the gift, thank you. It's my daughter plays the cello in her elementary school orchestra, and I know what it costs to lease and or buy some of the instruments that are used in these music programs. It's a big investment that the community makes and that the school system makes so that our children have these opportunities, and it's a great help when we have partners in the community who help us provide these opportunities for kids. So whoever the donor is, thank you very much. We certainly appreciate it. Are there any other comments? If not, the question's on the motion by Mr. Bailey to approve the gift. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion carries 6-0 with the student concurring.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the consideration of the 2013-14 and 2014-15 school calendars. Mr. Michael?
Good afternoon, Dr. Hardings, Dr. Wilcox, members of the board. My guest with me today is Mary Newby, and I think familiar face. We're here representing the calendar committee that met on November 29th, January 22nd, January 24th, to consider the 2013-14 calendar, school year calendar, as well as the 14-15 school year calendar. We had excellent discussion on a variety of topics, and I think we put together some excellent drafts for board consideration today, and that's our request, is that the board would consider these two calendars for approval. As we always do, we kind of looked at a student need calendar as one of our main priorities. How would this affect students? We certainly considered how it would affect teachers, other employees, and community members. We also had the challenge this year of working in what was just approved a few minutes ago, 4 marking periods for both secondary and elementary. As you're aware, in the past, we've had 6 secondary marking periods. So that provided some opportunities in the calendar, and we tried to take advantage of that. We also worked hard to and had to meet contractual obligations, COMAR obligations. And if you're not familiar with the obligations in the calendar, a lot of people kind of get enlightened and realize some of the challenges that we have with that. Also in this calendar, we've heard year after year the need to minimize half-days, and through some creative work, we've gone from 6 half-days. Some years we've had as many as 8 half-days to 2 half-days in this calendar. And we always try to balance marking periods and semesters the best that we can. The proposed 2013-14 calendar starts on a Wednesday. We had a great deal of discussion about that, but Wednesday, August 21st. It ends for students on June 12th, and that includes 8 snow days. Obviously, for every snow day we don't have, it would shorten the calendar. First semester would be 93 days, second semester would be 95 days, again, including the 8 snow days. 2014-15 calendar is proposed to begin on August 20th, again a Wednesday, in for students on June 11th with the 8 snow days built in. First semester, again, 93 days, second semester, 95, including all the snow days. And with that, I'd like to ask Ms. Newby if she would just share a few insights and discussion items from the committee members.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity to come and present the calendars. This is, I think, my 3rd time being on the calendar committee, and I'm very proud of the community that comes together to make this calendar, listening to all people that were represented on the committee. We made sure that we have a calendar that is conducive for student learning first, and there were several members of our committee that voiced their opinions on some issues, and I think that we all came to a consensus that we needed to build a calendar that was best for students first. So I think we have a great calendar that meets the needs of the students and then have considerations for teachers and community as well.
Okay. We'd be glad to entertain any questions you might have.
Is there a motion to approve the 2013-2014 calendar?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Is there any discussion on the calendar? Ms. Harshman?
I just have a question about I believe it's January, no, the one that I have circled is in March. And it says elementary 1/2 day for grading and 1/2 day for assessments. And then it says secondary 1/2 day for grading, 1/2 day for principal-led professional developments. What I was wondering is, what are the assessments? Is that...
Mary, I might let you answer what these...
That's the one that's in March?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it appears other places, but I just circled that
according
one.
to our negotiated agreement, elementary teachers are given an additional half-day for assessments, and so that's a contractual obligation.
And what assessments are those?
In the past, we have been required to give monthly reading benchmarks as well as math assessments, and those are kind of fading, so that is something that we haven't been able to have a negotiated agreement where we have changed that, so that needed to be part of the calendar.
Okay, well, my concern was that the secondary teachers were not given a full day of grading, which would include like the regular grading and assessments, because they too have assessments to grade. So I thought
that has not ever been a part of the calendar in the past. It's only been a half day for grading for the high school. The additional was a negotiated part of our contract a few years ago for elementary, because they're not given as much time to do the assessments as the secondary teachers had been given.
So it's impossible to give the secondary teachers a full day with assessments and grading?
Unless that...
But, I mean, it's not contractual that there'd be additional time for assessments. It was identified as a principal-led professional development time. There's nothing contractual that it has to be. But for elementary, it is contractual for each of the marking periods that we provide a half-day grading, half-day assessment that's contractual, as well as a half-day planning in both semesters. It says any time, but a half-day additional planning, not interrupted in the first semester and second semester. So those are some of those contractual obligations that we have. There's no contractual obligation for secondary, but there's also no contractual obligation that it be a principal-led professional development day. Does that help?
So it could go either way, is that what you're saying?
There's nothing contractually that says that it has to be principal-led.
Principal-led. And then who decides that?
The calendar at this point is the board's to decide.
Okay.
I think the feeling in the past, and Mary maybe correct me, I think as we went to 90-minute planning, the semester schedule, those types of things, even with team planning at middle school and high school, elementary, we've been constantly trying to build more time in for elementary planning, and then when we had all the assessments, contractually that information got into the contract. It was not placed in there for secondary teachers.
Will the 4 marking periods affect that with the secondary teachers, the length of class and planning?
With the 6-period day, I'd have to defer to Mr. Akers. I believe their planning will be 60 minutes, approximately.
So that might be something we want to consider, giving them time to grade assessments too? Or
Well,
no?
and maybe I'd let Mr. Akers, if he's still here, he might want to speak to it. I know that they were trying to work a lot of professional development. Actually, elementary was concerned they didn't have
Yeah.
enough professional development with the Common Core implementation, all the information they had with the new subject matter and those types of things. I believe, Mary, some of the concern you
Yeah,
expressed was more about the need for PD.
Right. As the lead teacher in a building that is a non-Title I school, I was concerned that the calendar, neither of the years reflected a lot of time for the elementary professional-led, principal-led, or supervisor-led professional development, which means we have to be creative in taking then time from the teacher's planning to have CPIP meetings to make sure that we have that professional development. But I know that the half-day for assessments is part of the negotiated agreement, only for elementary.
With the change of the length of the each class, is that going to? There he is. There's Rick. Is that going to then be a consideration where professional development is concerned? In other words, if the elementary truly wants more professional development, and since we are changing the school year to 4 marking periods, it seems like it's just as long as it was before. So I wasn't sure. I was expecting, because of the ability to line up the elementary and the high school marking periods, I was thinking that that would sort of condense the year a little, and it's still the same length. So I'm wondering if there's some place there that professional development could be for both groups for an entire day or something.
I think we picked up the majority of that time when we eliminated some half-days, which we've heard from parents to be a challenge for daycare and things. I would say the assessments would certainly be a potential topic for negotiations when language is opened in another year.
We really have to address those contractual issues, and that really hasn't changed. We do address all our contractual obligations, but because there are more of those that pertain to elementary than do secondary, they obviously didn't benefit quite as much as far as professional development as secondary did. But again, as Mr. Michael said, that in the future, through negotiation, that may change because a lot of the assessment requirements are changing.
Well, that's what, right before you came in, that's what I was really asking was the fact that the secondary teachers were using half of a day for a professional development instead of grading assessments. So I just thought maybe we could do that evenly with the
But Rick,
secondary and elementary.
if the thinking is that by moving to the 6-period day, we're creating more instructional time for students, I think up to 42 hours you would calculate at one point. If I'm a teacher and I now have a release period that mirrors a student contact period, aren't I gaining more planning time as a secondary instructor as well?
Mm-mm. The periods are shorter.
But you're meeting more frequently. So, I mean, I don't understand where that logic breaks down.
I'm not sure I'm following on the...
I think what you're saying is before we had a 4-period day, so you had a full fourth of the day, the periods
You had a
scheduled
90-minute
for
period.
90
Every
minute planning.
Every day.
So now you're going to have 60 minutes because you have 6 periods in the day instead of 4. So it shortens every period, including the planning.
Right. So if I'm a high school principal and I schedule my teachers according to the new schedule, and students are gaining instructional time, and a teacher's schedule mirrors a student's schedule in terms of hours, are you saying that the teachers are losing planning time, or do they gain planning time like the student gains instructional time?
No, the teacher would
Lose.
It would shorten each period, and so the planning period will be shorter. It'll still exceed the
Contractual
requirement
obligation.
by 10 minutes.
So my point would be, how have you calculated how much time that will be? I'm trying to get to Mrs. Harshman's point that there may be the need to talk about additional time at some subsequent point in the year.
Yes, and what we have talked about
conducting some of the like CFIT processes in that half an hour after school as opposed to during the planning period, so that we have that unbroken 50 minutes of planning time. So we have talked about adapting to that change, but that whether we stayed with 6 marking periods or 4 marking periods really wouldn't affect that piece. But what the calendar does is we recapture both for secondary and elementary. We recapture about 12 and a half hours of instructional time by eliminating the early dismissals, and as Mr. Michael said, it also answers the question that a lot of our parents had about daycare on those days.
Are there other questions or comments on the calendar? Ms. Crable?
For the 2013-2014 calendar, I know spring break is labeled as being 3 days out of school and a weekend in April, but there are also 3 days in March, which is the end of the 3rd marking period. I'm wondering why we wouldn't just put those together for a longer spring break, why they're broken up, because in all the years I've been here, I think it's been one chunk, and in the 14-15 one, it's one chunk.
Right, that it just depends on when that spring break comes. The state of Maryland requires us to be closed for students on
certain days,
on the Friday and Monday before and after Easter.
Okay.
So we have no, don't have flexibility for that part. So then what happens is that we try to marry up with that the best we can with spring break, but sometimes just depending upon how late that is or how early that is in the year, we can't always marry it up at the end of the marking period.
Okay.
So I think you see in one calendar it marries up and one calendar doesn't.
It doesn't.
Marry up.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And believe me, you're not the first one to ask that question.
Well.
Mr. Rideout, Ms. Fisher?
Well, I just wanted to thank both the committee members and the staff members. I know this is a hard thing to wrestle with. There are so many obligations that must be met, so I just want to say thank you for all your hard work.
Mr. Rideout?
I would echo that. It's a hideously difficult thing to do. But I do have a couple of questions. Is MSEA Day contractual? I cannot remember off the top of my head.
It's not in the WCTA contract, but it is in the ESP contract.
Are you serious?
Yes, sir.
Fascinating. I will tell you that, 30 years of teaching and 10, 11 years 10 years, I guess I've been here now, close to 10 years. The calendar always, to me, seems disjointed. I apologize for that, but it does. We have 5 breaks in here for PD, and I'm wondering not so much about, should we cut out some of the PD, but can we find a way, I don't know, to do more with less or to do it more condensed? In other words, beginning and end, or it just seems like those days used to drive me crazy. There's like, you have kids for 2 days, then we have 2 days of PD, and then you have a day with a kid or 2 days. It just doesn't seem like you get a lot of continuity with those days in there. They just have always seemed like, okay, we got to get some professional development in. Let's put them in. Now, I'm not questioning, Mary, please forgive me. I'm not questioning, the work that goes into those and maybe the need for those. But I'm just wondering if there isn't a better way, maybe to split them at beginning and end, or more at the beginning, where we're going to, obviously need to talk more with our staffs and with our teachers than maybe we do even during the year. I know we have to have them contractually for grading. That part of it I know, but otherwise, I'm just wondering, is there a way, can we look at a way to do that? And I think that then speaks to maybe what Amanda has spoken about, the spring break. Is there a way that we can get a full week of spring break? And what would it take to do that? I think we probably have more professional development days than most of our neighbors. To be truthful with you, I think Frederick County only has 185 teacher days. I'm not sure about Allegheny, I'm not sure about a couple others, but it just seems like there's got to be a better way. Maybe that's just me, and if my colleagues don't agree, then I'll sit here as the Lone Ranger, but it just seems like there's got to be a better way.
Like I say, we've had the 10 days of professional development for as long as I can remember.
Oh, I can tell you to almost to the date when that happened.
Traditionally, we have front-loaded a lot of it. That, we have 4 days before the school year starts, and then most of it occurred in the first few months. The reasoning behind the distribution, having PD roughly every 9 weeks, is to coincide with the implementation of the Common Core curriculum. That as we are making this mass change in what we teach and when, it was felt that to have those 4 days at the beginning of the year, as we have traditionally, to start the year, and then to be able to check back in every 9 weeks and sort of how did we do and what are we doing next, and so that it would be sort of methodical. So if you look at it, that was the intention, to really space that out every 9 weeks so that subject supervisors can meet with teachers every 9 weeks and not just front load it and then not be able to really meet with them and talk about it until the end of the year, but rather to be able to do it periodically throughout the year. So it's a lot different than what it has been in the past, and that I think most of the PD was scheduled during October, November in the past. But then, like you say, subject supervisors wouldn't really see their teachers for any length of time, for the rest of the year. So this really kind of coincides with the implementation of Common Core.
I mean, I understand where you're coming from in that respect, but we now have in each school, we have lead teachers who meet with subject supervisors or who meet with individuals who would be responsible. I mean, it just seems to me that there might be a way to utilize their talents for professional development, to put it in a position that we don't have to have this every 9 weeks. And again, maybe it's just me, but I will tell you that, when I started teaching in the first probably 15 years of it, this was a result of a raise, of all things. We went from 5 professional development days to 10 professional development days because the contract read teachers will work up to 190 days. Well, there was 1 year that there was a raise. All of a sudden, the next year, there were 190 days. So, I mean, that's the simple historical story. And again, I do believe, obviously, the beginning of the year may be the most essential, because you are gearing up. And I think in a lot of ways you're more in tune with, the professional development process than you are at any other time in the year. That's when you're there, you're juiced, you're ready to hear what's being said and ready to absorb it. So, I mean, I understand where you're coming from. I'm still, I'm not 100% in agreement. So, thank you. Thanks for the answers. I appreciate your time.
Other questions or comments? I've got a couple, and I'll just come out and say it. Let's talk about spring break. I get that question an awful lot, and as I prepared for today's meeting, I looked at what neighboring counties and other counties in Maryland do, and I didn't check every county, but Allegheny County, Frederick County, Carroll County, Montgomery County, Prince George's County, Baltimore County, all have 6 non-school days consecutive for a spring break. I think there's a couple of benefits to that. Number one is it tends to bunch the days off into groups so that a family, or whether it's a family with children in the school or a family with teachers in the system or employees of the system, I think have opportunities to take a real vacation if they want as a family. I think providing a break from, I think putting the days off into one section helps also reduce the number of days off in the middle of weeks throughout the rest of the year, which gives you more full weeks, which is what we say that we want to achieve. I think you'd get better attendance. As I look at the 14-15 calendar there's 2 days off at the end of 1 week and 3 days off at the beginning of the following week. I think attendance those 2 weeks is going to be, I just don't think it's going to be good. And as I looked at other counties' calendars, what I kept seeing was, gee, their calendar starts, or their first day of school is often after ours. They get a full week off for spring break, and their last day of school is the same as ours. And I'm thinking, how can this be? Well, part of it is that they only schedule 4 or 5 contingency days for snow. We seem to schedule 8. So it seems to me that there's a formula there, or a way that we could get to doing what I certainly know a lot of families would appreciate. By giving the full week before Easter off, you could, for Jewish families, they would have Passover off. I think there are just a lot of benefits to going to that model, and I'd like to know what discussion there was of that in the committee and why the decision was made to go the way that the committee went.
I don't know who wants to start. We wrestled with that. I mean, a couple challenges with that. We looked at the attendance for the days that led up prior to the Easter break the last 2 years. Now, last year, as you recall, we had Monday, then they moved primary election day to that Tuesday, that spring break week, and we just like, what else could we do with that? And the board made an adjustment to the calendar, and then Wednesday. So I think we were like 93 or 4%. Obviously, we weren't open on Tuesday, and then we dropped to like 85% last year. The year before, the 3 days before Easter, we ran just a little bit around 90 to 92% all 3 days. And part of the balance was, what will those days be at the end of June? Will we run higher or lower than that 92% for that week? So that was part of our discussion. Another part of the discussion, and what good or bad in the calendar where we have these double days off, parents can request 3 days for an approved vacation that count as excused days. So not only are you restricted to just spring break, you might be able to do it 3 or 4 different places if it doesn't align with spring break. So we kind of kicked that one around. Another topic of discussion was for ESP employees that are not 12-month, if we eliminate 3 more school days in there, their check will be reduced by 3 days. Not their total pay, but just the check that they got during that time. So those are things that were kicked around. There's no magic to the 8 snow days. I mean, a quick fix to this, if the board chooses to be off those 3 days, we close for students and teachers. The central office will have to be open to get the 260 work days in. And you either add 3 days on the end of the year, or you reduce the number of snow days from 8 to 5. And that would be an immediate adjustment to that. As I said to Amanda's question earlier, we can't get away from this Friday, Monday piece off. That was one of our discussions. If we could align that Friday and pull that 1 day that we're required to be off up into that same week, and then have our couple days off, it wouldn't be any lost time at all. So I don't know, Mary, other thoughts you remember?
That was a highly contested week in our discussions, and what I found was the student who was a representative on the committee. He said that if you give me that week off, that's one less week of learning that I have to prepare myself for my assessments, and to give those days off in June isn't going to help me in my AP courses. So it was a great comment from a student's perspective. He says, I'm losing 3 more days of learning, and I really need those 3 days of learning. So no, it wasn't a parent. It was a student who made that comment. So.
Can you explain what you said again about excused days? Because I've taken my family out for 3 days, and that doesn't stop me from getting the letter that says my children have been. Right. After 6 days, you get the letter that says your child's been absent six days, and state law requires your child to be in school, et cetera, et cetera. And
right.
How does it being 3 excused days figure into that process?
Well, the board policy has a line written in it, and I'm going back just whenever that was last adjusted, so I probably won't have it correct, but it states that if your child has excellent attendance, the parent may request up to 3 vacation days for their child that will be excused. Children that have poor attendance, when I was a principal, if they already had poor attendance, I normally didn't approve those types of requests. Children had excellent attendance, excellent grades. I didn't even hesitate to approve those requests, especially when a parent was trying to align that with a long weekend or some other time that they were off. The notice of attendance is, I think, Rick, that's part of board policy as well. We're to notify parents at certain milestones. Maybe a little bit of that will adjust here. Or actually, our language is aligned around full year attendance.
Well, but the letter, the automated letters on the secondary level have been adjusted to a semesterized schedule, so of course those will be switching back now. But the number of days is ultimately 12 on a year-long schedule as far as the number of days that students can miss and for number of days they can miss before, like on the high school level, they might have their credits be in jeopardy. When you're on a semesterized schedule where you condense the courses into one semester, that number 12 becomes 6. And so those letters, when they're sent out automatically, the computer will do it as soon as it notices you've hit 3 days, 5 days, 6 days. But whether or not there is any consequence, for example, there's a big difference between an unexcused absence and an excused. So the letter goes out automatically, but when administrators go to find out why, this is a student who had good attendance but took a family vacation, and they just don't act on it. I know that doesn't help the parent who gets that letter and may be alarmed by the letter, but again, we're sort of obligated to be able to show, document that we've warned parents that their kids have missed this many days.
Well,
At the elementary level, we also use it at 6, 9, and 12 days. And as a principal, what I felt was useful within that letter was sometimes if a child wasn't going to school or didn't arrive at school, and a parent received that letter and said, well, my children haven't been absent that many days, I could go back and say these were the days. And I've actually had times when a child may not have went to school but opted to do something else and the parent did not realize that. So those letters actually help us just to let parents know this is how many days excused or unexcused that the child's been out of school.
Okay, I appreciate the clarification on that. I would argue that probably in the rest of the year, I bet, and while I don't doubt the numbers that you recite about 90% or so attendance the week of Easter, I would bet that attendance the rest of the year would be higher if there were a full week at spring break. Because I can tell you, and maybe I'm outing myself and my family, we've taken vacations when there are 2 days off of school in a week. Because when else are we going to do it? I mean, unless you want to be away for the holidays, you've got the summer, but there is no other opportunity in our calendar where a family can plan that. And I know there are an awful lot of families, and teachers for that matter, who are forced, not forced, because you're not forced to take a vacation, but if you want to take a vacation, the only time you can do it is to miss school. So I would suggest that you would improve attendance throughout the rest of the year if you were to give this opportunity to students and families. I'm sorry, Mrs. Harshman.
That's okay. I was thinking about what you had said about the 3 excused days, and the problem there is that if those students opt to take those days at different times during the year, school still goes on. So if by chance the parent has pulled them out for 3 consecutive days, that child has missed 3 days of instruction. Whereas if it's a designated vacation, everybody has missed the same days. So I do believe that that's something that should be considered, and I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Michael, for changing the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I've only been trying to do that since I was on the calendar. Thank you.
Part of that flexibility came in, generally what coincided right there was the need to have a professional day for the secondary marking period, for the end of the second marking period of the secondary schools. So that gave us greater flexibility with everybody being back on 4 marking periods.
I know you gave me all those excuses whenever I was begging you for that Wednesday, so I just wanted to thank you. I appreciate the fact that you now have addressed that, but I am concerned about the spring break.
Ms. Crable?
Here's the thing. If you If you do spring break, if it's arranged, and I think you can arrange it with the days you already have if you just move them around, and I don't know how willing you are to do that, but if you rearrange them, I think you can do it without missing the days that the student was concerned about. And I do agree, it's a problem. But if you give them a weekend, an entire week off, Easter Sunday, and then that Monday, that's 6 days, which most of the other counties were doing. It's 6 days, and then the kids have an extra weekend to go on vacation, to go on college visits, to go do whatever. And that's a problem. Because I'm telling you, last year when it was election day, I wasn't there that Wednesday. I was at a college visit, because what else do you do? So that becomes the problem. And I think if you do that, you're actually going to have less people missing school because you have 2 extra days on a weekend. And if you just rearrange days, I think it would work.
The challenge is rearranging the days because, I mean, if we can at some point negotiate out this assessment day on elementary, it really frees up a lot of things. But that assessment and grading day, unless we create a half-day type situation to meet that contractual obligation at the end of each market period, that really drives the one part of what we have to do. As far as professional days, we could stack them up all during that spring break week. If there was any logic to that, it wouldn't be good for teachers that are trying to leave for the spring break, so we'd have to watch those types of things. Yeah, the discussion we had, not good or bad, but we have children that rely on us for lunch and breakfast, and they don't go on vacation, and those types of things. That was just another point of the discussion.
But
well, that happens
many of the
over
counties
Christmas.
that I mentioned that have the full week have a higher farm rate than we do.
Yeah, and that happens over Christmas too. They have to find other places. So,
Are there any other comments or questions? I'd like to see the calendar committee or staff or take another crack at it and see what the calendar would look like with the spring break in it. But that's just my opinion, and I can't make motions. So if it's really what the consensus of the full board is. I've sort of said what I think, and
Well, I would make a motion to ask the calendar committee to go back. I apologize to put you back to work again, but to go back and take a look at that particular issue and maybe come up with recommendations. I mean, a variety if you want to bring us more than one calendar or show us what and how they could possibly work or how this could be worked in. That, I would ask the calendar committee to take a look at the spring break issue in particular.
Can I ask a point of clarification?
Sure.
Would it be the intent that the teachers would be off during that week?
I think
would
that's
think
what I'm
so.
asking.
yeah,
The
spring
calendar.
break would be the whole break, county break.
I mean, that drives significantly what the counter committee would do. I mean, they can bring back 2 or 3 options, but if it's the intention for the teachers to be off that week, we can almost predict what would have to happen. We'll have to close those 3 days, and we'll just make an adjustment on the end of the year. It's relatively easy. You might be able to do it with an amendment to the motion. If it's bring back a variety of options, we'll be glad to do that.
I sort of game planned in my mind last night how one could make that happen for this calendar coming up, and I can think of 3 or 4 ways to do it, and I would hesitate unless we as a board were to go into a more workshop type format where we could sit and kick around ideas for an hour and a half to 2 hours to try to, on the fly during a meeting, for us to make a change that's significant, but that's...
Why wouldn't
I wouldn't want to take that away from the committee. I think ultimately that should be the calendar committee's charge and their decision, and to present whatever options they can come up with to make that spring break happen.
Dr. Wilcox?
I was going to say, I share Mrs. Williams' concern. I would like the calendar committee to have the opportunity to review some of the work that they've done. What I would ask the board, though, is for your consensus around the start date, because I think there are some parents who are absolutely waiting for us to announce that start date. We have teachers who are planning summer vacations and things. They need to know when they come back. If there is at least kind of a nodding of heads that the start date looks good, then that allows us to begin thinking a little bit differently. I don't think it ropes us in with the solution to spring break. I think it simply says we're okay. We can go ahead and say, here's what the start date looks like. Boyd, correct me if I'm wrong.
I wouldn't anticipate the start date changing.
So if
with any of those
the
options.
consensus of the board would be, take this back, bring it back to us next time we meet on the 19th, but we think the start date looks good, that would be helpful to us.
Are you saying the start date for students?
Student start date, yes, student start date. I may do something different with the in-service around it, but
Right.
the start
That's what
date
I'm
for
saying.
students.
Okay.
So the parliamentary position right now is the motion on the floor is on the approval of the 2013-14 calendar. So we either have to defeat that or withdraw the motion, the second, and withdraw the motion so that we can get into a point where we could take consensus or actually make a motion and have the board resolve to set the first day of school. So we can either vote on the motion and have it pass or fail, or we could have the second withdrawn and the motion withdrawn.
Quickest is to vote. If the majority of the members want the calendar as it is, then they've
it'll
spoken.
pass.
So I think we need to
Okay.
vote on it. Personally, that's my opinion, Dr. Hardings.
Well, if there are no other comments, the question is on the motion by Mr. Ridenour to approve the 2013-2014 calendar. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion fails 5-1 with the student concurring with the majority. Okay, so is there a motion to set... Hold on, let me get my calendar back. Is there a motion to set August 21st as the first day of school for the 2013-2014 calendar year? School calendar year.
Student attendance.
The first day of first day of school for students.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenour. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Is there any discussion on that topic? I think it was a good idea, Dr. Wilcox, because I've had a number of people ask me that question as well. And before we vote, I guess, on the last thing on this topic, I'll also take the opportunity to thank the calendar committee. I stopped by, I think, 2 of their meetings, stopped by the last one and just actually did, on behalf of all the board members, thank the people who served on that committee. I know they give a lot of time, and many of them take days off of work, hours off of work to come and serve us through that committee. So please know how much we appreciate what you do, and we appreciate it so much we're going to ask you to do a little more. Yes,
Point of
Mrs. Williams.
clarification, do we need to have a motion to send the calendar committee back with a particular charge, or we just send them back with, they have the understanding that
We know.
that's what we, okay.
We
Okay,
know.
all right.
All right, so the question's on the motion to set August 21st as the first day of school for students for next year's school calendar. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion carries 6-0 with the student concurring. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is personnel action. Ms. Francisco.
Dr. Hardings, Dr. Wilcox, members of the board. We are seeking your consideration on the proposed staff changes as reviewed earlier in your closed session for February 5th.
Is there a motion to approve the personnel actions recommended by staff?
Mr. President, I move for approval of the personnel actions as presented earlier today.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenour. Is there any discussion? If not, the question is on the motion by Mrs. Fisher to approve the personnel action. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion carries 6-0 and the student abstains.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is a legislative update. Mrs. Cade.
Good afternoon, Dr. Harding, Dr. Wilcox, and members of the board.
It's a pleasure to be here to bring you up to date on what is happening in Annapolis in the legislature. We will be touching on a few things, and there are many more going on. It has overall thus far been a quieter session than some years, but most of the big issues are just beginning to be discussed, things such as the gun bill and the death penalty. In terms of education, we had a really fine day in Annapolis last week when Dr. Wilcox and Dr. Hardings and Mrs. Brightman attended the Washington County Day. We had excellent meetings, I think, with the governor's education liaison, Pat Forster, with Treasurer Kopp, with Chairman Conway and Hickson, and a number of other people. And I wanted to compliment, first of all, the document that the staff here put together that was distributed to many people during that day. We were able to give this documentation about school expenses, but comparing Washington County with other counties in a number of factors, and things such as disparity grants, but other factors. This was a fine work by your staff, and you can be very proud. I believe it was Chris South and Tony Trotta and Jamie Brown who were primarily responsible for it. And I was proud to give it to various people as we met with them. You also had a fine exhibit at the reception, and I was very impressed with your young tech high school students who were there, speaking so well to people who were looking at their exhibits and proudly talking about their college acceptances and the scholarships they've already received. I was proud to be associated with the Washington County Board of Education. During that day, we had a fine meeting with the staff of Legislative Services, and they had presented a document which I believe has been distributed to each of you, aid to local governments. I know you have many, many responsibilities, but in this document, toward the back, there are a number of pages about school systems and wealth per pupil for state education programs, at-risk student enrollment in public schools, and so forth. So just spending some time with this document, and it is also online available, and your staff has it, and I believe, as I say, has distributed already to you. In that presentation, there is a good bit about disparity grants, and as we have taken a position to try and restore Washington County as a recipient of disparity grants, county money that would not directly come to the Board of Education, but would enhance the funding of the county itself, and the teacher retirement supplemental grants. In both cases, Washington County has been frozen out, and primarily, I would say, because 1 year they were not eligible at a time when when the disparity grants were frozen, and then as the eligibility has come back in, those frozen grant levels have not been released, and the counties that were eligible have not been brought in. So $6-7 million a year in the last couple of years would have come to the county had those grants been available. We had meetings that day, and I think Dr. Hardings will speak to one of them that I didn't attend, but with legislative staff who are very sympathetic to the inequity, and with Chairman Hickson and Chairman Conway. Chairman Conway of the Appropriations Committee was still not very encouraging about this, although I understand Chairman Hickson was very encouraging that this might work out this year. So it's something that I'm spending time working on. I'm going to be meeting with Senator Madalena, who chairs the Education Subcommittee in the Senate, on Thursday, and try and meet with the chairman of the overall committee. And I've also talked with Senator Edwards in this regard. So it's an issue that's out there. It's got some politics tied in with it. It's also something that has fiscal implications. So whether or not we can break through this year and get that taken care of, we're going to keep trying till the last moment. There are lots of bills on school safety, as one would expect, and some of them are fine, others are very prescriptive and are things that MABE is taking a position against. One that I referred to in my written report, calls for evaluation of effectiveness of systems emergency plans. It calls on you as the board of each county to look at your emergency plans and see if they are up to the standard you want them to be, and to report this to the state board, and they would then report to the legislature. It is a good bill, actually, because it is just saying the legislature is concerned about school safety. They know that you are the people who should be looking at school safety and in your jurisdiction, and they're really leaving it to you rather than telling you exactly how you should do something. Some of the other bills say every school should have a school safety staff person. Another bill calls for just about almost how you would lock the doors, and MABE is carefully making a position that, for instance, in future school buildings and rehabs, things like access should be really looked at. But for some schools, having a buzzer system may not be the same importance as it is in another school where entrance is through an office and so forth. So we're trying to acknowledge that local boards should have the right to make their evaluation and to make your decisions on how your school safety should be assured. There is $25 million in the governor's capital budget for school safety improvements, and the guidelines for that have not yet been written, but it is expected that the 15-year life requirement is not going to be included, and there probably will be a good bit of flexibility in those, and hopefully the processing for those grants will come. There will be a requirement for some match from the local government, but that hasn't yet been defined. And there are bills in for Maryland Center for School Safety, a centralized place where this is being, where there's training and so forth. The governor put some money in his budget to have that in as part of the state police complex, but there's also a piece of legislation in that would establish such a center at Bowie State, and there is the hope that that would have a broader, less militaristic kind of approach and would look at all the factors in school safety in a broader way. So that will, I think, is something that will get worked out without a lot of contention. In the budget, one of the pieces of legislation that's going to affect the budget somewhat is the legislation that will Senate Bill 277 that will relieve the problem of net taxable income, and it's a complicated thing in terms of when the wealth is established for a county, having to do with whether that date is September 1st or November 1st, because many of the higher income people, I understand, do not pay their income taxes until later. So a November 1st date has a different scattering of wealth than a September 1st date, which is the current date. So they have developed legislation which allows counties to look at the alternate between those, and they will be funded at whichever level is preferable for them, and there's a $34 million increase in the budget to accomplish this. So every county is a winner in this bill, and every school system. And so that bill, I believe, will go through without much problem. There are two bills of real concern having to do, first of all, there's a proposal to change the labor relations bill that was approved a few years ago, and the Labor Relations Board is in action now, and they have asked for some changes. One of the features in that bill says that if you go through the whole process and there's an agreement by the Labor Relations Board that exceeds the amount of funding that you have available, that your county has made available to you in the budget to fund the agreement, that then you have consultation with the unions, but you retain the final authority on what will be done with the money you do have available for that agreement. And this bill would call on allowing that the negotiating groups ask for, and you'd have to consider some alternative method for making those decisions. And this could lead to a lot of continuing negotiations. And this feature in that bill was the true feature that the legislature felt kept this process from being totally binding arbitration. And so this feature in the bill is really important to be maintained. So there'll be a lot of effort put into fighting the change that is proposed. Again, I know that's complicated, and I will continue to report on that in my future reports. Also, there is a bill in House Bill 667 that the agency fee be a mandated rather than a permissive subject for negotiation. And I believe there are 9 counties now where it is permissive, and I believe you are one of them. So this is a bill that's been put in by chairman of committees. It is a bill that is going to have a lot of weight going forward. So Mabel is taking a position in opposition, but it will be a bill that is one to watch very closely. House Bill 552 is the bill which you requested for the athletic practices starting date, and it is being heard on February 20th in Ways and Means Committee in the afternoon, and we have been having conversations with people. We expect that Ned Sparks from the association at the state level will oppose the bill. I've been working with my colleagues from the other counties, urging that they support the bill or at least not oppose the bill. Mabe, I hope, will not take a position on it because there will be counties for it and counties against it, and hopefully we'll have more than our county for it. And I just talked to Mr. Ridenour, who has the hearing on his schedule and plans to be there, and hopefully there will be some receptivity to that bill. It will not be easy to get that through because the large counties on the whole before really oppose even having somebody suggest that they start everything August 1st because it's more costly with coaches and so forth. So we'll do our best, but it is not going to be easy. But I expect Mr. Ridenour's testimony will persuade the committee. We still have two members of our delegation on Ways and Means. And Delegate Myers is no longer on the Education Subcommittee, but Delegate Serafini is now on that subcommittee. So we do have ears and voices that are looking out for Washington County on that subcommittee, which really does a lot of the work that eventually affects you. The bills about we're watching the bills about the searchable database on your budget and on purchasing and so forth that is being proposed, and watching the bill on adding people to who's covered by the third-degree sex offenses. You all received also this packet, which came yesterday. I believe this was from our meeting at the Legislative Committee, and Mrs. Brightman, I believe, sent you an email with a little bit of follow-up from that. I can go on and on, as you know, but I know that you have other business to attend to, and I would be happy to answer any questions, or do you have anything you wanted to add?
Thank you, Ms. Kate. Are there questions or comments from board members? I'll just lead off, I guess, by restating what Ms. Cade said. It really was a great day last Wednesday in Annapolis. You couldn't go anywhere in Annapolis without running into somebody from Washington County. Between the Chamber of Commerce, Leadership Washington County was there. We had a presence as a school system. I think at least 3 commissioners were there at some point during the day. There was a real presence for Washington County, and the reception was very, very well attended, and our students were really fantastic. Dr. Wilcox, I said to him, I think on the way back from Annapolis, that he often talks about teaching students the lexicon of their craft, sort of the language that, you listen to some of those students in the medical sciences field, and I'll tell you what, they've got quite a vocabulary, in the best sense of the word. Really, really impressive young men and women. So to all the people that helped put that on, I know the school system put a lot of resources into, not a lot of resources, but a lot of time anyway, into making sure our students could be there and put on a good show, not just for Washington County schools, but for the county. I think it clearly was impressive to a lot of people. We have great students, and it's great to see other people see how great they are. To your point about the disparity grant, I sat in 3 or 4 meetings that day with various combinations of people and legislators. Some people were very positive, some were not so positive. So I think the message that I took from it was, you need to reach out to as many people as we possibly can, because you never know when you're going to be in a meeting with the person who's going to be able to make the difference for you. I personally sat in a meeting with Delegate Hickson and Delegate Myers. She seemed positive, so she certainly didn't make any promises. She's one delegate of however many, but I came away thinking, maybe we do have a chance at this. Other takeaways from the day, it was just great to have Team Washington County all together. So, and thank you, Ms. Cade, for coordinating a lot of what I did. I know what Mrs. Brightman did. We were together sometimes, in separate meetings sometimes, but it was an effort to really cast the net as wide as we possibly could. So,
my pleasure.
Are there other questions or comments? I also sat before the delegation at the delegation meeting and spoke on behalf of the athletics bill, and it was supported by all of our delegation. So I just wanted to report that back to the full board. Anything else? All right. Thank you, Ms. Kate. All right.
Thanks, Art.
Next on the agenda is board member committee reports. Ms. Crable?
We had a wonderful Washington County meeting last week. There were 65 students from myriad of middle and high schools. Almost all of them were represented. It was really a wonderful meeting. We have another meeting February 15th, which is a Friday, starting somewhere around 9:30 in the Tech High Auditorium. We're very excited. I don't think we've decided what we're doing yet, but it'll be a good meeting, whatever we do. And I invite everybody.
I'm sorry, what was the date again?
It is Friday, February 15th at the Tech High Auditorium, somewhere between 9 and 1.
All right.
The times sort of depend on when the buses come or leave. So we invite you, as always.
All right. Thank you. Mrs. Harshman, curriculum?
Well, we're in the process of trying to get a date that will accommodate several of the members of our committee who have some conflicts. So we will have that posted along with the agenda as soon as we can get the time and date straightened out.
Great, thank you. Mr. Bailey, Finance?
Yes, Finance did meet in the month of January. Members of the committee are Dr. Hardings, Mrs. Williams, and myself. Staff presented what is known as financials, just kind of a checkup on the budget, looking at items that may be plus or minus 5% over what it ought to be this time of year when we're at the halfway point. And we all agreed that things were very much on target, and complimented staff on that particular item. We had a discussion of the 403B plan, which we will continue to discuss at our next meeting and perhaps bring a recommendation to the board very promptly on that. The 403B plan, just briefly, is a benefit type plan for employees where they can invest in not just a single provider, which we currently have, but if we adopt a 403B plan, there would be a number of providers that employees could select from if they care to. We will continue to discuss that, as I said, at our next meeting, and we'll also be talking about grants that come the Board of Education way and are part of the financial picture. So we'll meet again on February the 28th.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Mrs. Fisher, policy?
Right now, Policy Committee is scheduled to meet February 26th at 11 o'clock in the board meeting room. However, we are considering moving that meeting to February 28th at 11:30, again to accommodate some people who have conflicts, but once that's determined, it'll be posted. On behalf of Mrs. Brightman, I also would like to report on the Facilities Committee's next meeting. It is also scheduled on February 26th. The time is 9:45, and it will be held at the Frederick Street building. Also, on January 28th, I attended the County Citizens Advisory Committee meeting. It featured Dr. Steve Burnett, who is our supervisor of school counseling, and he presented a very, I found interesting anyway, presentation on the K-12 school counseling academic, college, and career success plan for our school system.
Great, thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Mr. Ridenhour, Human Resources.
The HR committee has not met. We will be meeting as necessary, and as our new director gets her feet wet and issues come up, we will come together when necessary.
Thank you. And Mrs. Harshman, Mrs. Williams, is there any update on the May Conference Planning Committee or any of the...
Nothing new to report.
Nothing new.
Okay. Great. Future agenda items. The Agenda Planning Committee has not met since our last meeting. We're going to meet later on today, so we don't have anything to report out. There's one item that'll be on the agenda March 19th. That's the electricity supply for the Frederick Area Cooperative Purchasing Committee. Also, as I mentioned at the work session 2 weeks ago, we will be, or I guess it was last week, We'll be scheduling a joint meeting at some point with the Hagerstown Mayor and Council, as well as other groups who have ideas or proposals or things that they'd like us to think about or consider for the central office facility. Board member comments? Mr. Ridenhour?
Nothing at this time, Dr. Harding.
Ms. Fisher?
Nothing.
I have nothing, Mr. President.
Ms. Williams?
I have nothing at this time, thank you.
Mrs. Hirschman?
Nothing.
Nothing. You're a quiet crowd today. I'll just add a couple of things. I already mentioned that I attended the calendar committee meeting. Also attended the, I don't know if it's an exhibit, display, recital, whatever you want to call it, of the Barbara Ingram School dance group. They performed at the Museum of Fine Arts one afternoon. The board was invited. I attended. Really spectacular to see such great dancers in such a unique space. I mean, that's the atrium there is really beautiful since they've enclosed it, and to see what those dancers are able to do in that space, it's just a really neat environment. If anybody gets a chance to see the senior project from it's To Starry Starry Night, the Don McLean version, and then with a painting in the background and sort of a dance interpretation of that by all the seniors in the program, it's really spectacular. So anybody who gets a chance to see that anywhere, I would not miss the chance, and I look forward to possibly seeing it again. I also attended the retirement reception for Gail Butcher, who I guess Friday was her last day on the job out at Marshall Street. It's a community that really loved their principal. It was fun to be there. There was a lot of enthusiasm, especially for students with disabilities. Had a lot of things put in my ear about what we can do to serve those students as well as we possibly can. I enjoyed being there and appreciate it. And finally, I don't know if we've met since then or if we have had a chance to acknowledge that Boonesboro High School was named a state blue ribbon school. I think only 6 schools statewide received that distinction, which is really, really quite an honor. So to all the students at Boonesboro High School, the teachers and the administrators at Boonesboro, the administrators here who support them, and really all the people in all the feeder patterns for that school, because they all have something to do with those students showing high academic achievement. And I just wanted to acknowledge that and thank them for what they do for our students. Are there any other comments from anybody else? If not, we'll declare the meeting adjourned.